Dr. Barry, London News. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world watching this. Thank you for coming on. I got a few clips from The Outsiders. It's a program on Sky News. Great program, puts a lot of really good facts up. Some of it I can't leave on YouTube because I'll get shut down, which is their platform and it's their prerogative, right? So if you could come across to Rumble, where the whole thing will be up on Rumble, the bits that I can't say. Now, Rumble takes a little bit of time because they're very busy putting stuff up, so it may not be up there immediately, but it will be up. So come across to Rumble and please subscribe, and please keep subscribing on YouTube. Keeping it very brief, the Common Law Court, I put a video up. It didn't tell people very much. I had to wait for the paperwork to be served on the people who were involved in the court case. That paperwork has been served. I'm now in the process of making a full disclosure, the paperwork, who was charged, what they were charged with, the outcome, what it cost them. And when we're looking at one woman in a private capacity is up for $2.2 million in relation to a few unlawful dismissals. Let's keep it simple. The paperwork will be up. A lot more information will be up. I hope to get that video done this week. I'm going to interview the people who laid the charges against their employers. They will give their side of the story. And I don't think the other people will give their side because I don't think they're very happy, which is fair enough. But a lot more information will be disclosed. Thanks for subscribing and keep on watching. Please come across to Rumble and subscribe there.
Good morning and welcome to Outsiders, the show that is to political correctness gone mad and woke virtue signalling what Labour leader Anthony Albanese is to original political speech writing and avoiding accusations of plagiarism at all costs.
If you believe economic policy should deliver higher wages, Labor is on your side.
Yeah. With this manifesto, Labor put the government on your side.
If you support equality for women, Labor is on your side.
Yeah. If you're a student, Labor is on your side.
You believe that older Australians deserve dignity and care in their later years, Labor is on your side.
If you are reaching old age, Labor is on your side.
A Labor government that is on your side.
Yes, that was Albo ripping off Jeremy Corbyn, of all people, during his budget reply speech only last year. Corbyn being the disgraced UK Labour leader who was repeatedly accused of anti-Semitism and even suspended from the party following comments downplaying his party's anti-Semitic views, and who still refuses to apologise for some of what are deemed to be anti-Semitic comments. I would have thought the last person Alba would have sought his inspiration from was the hard, loopy left-winger Jeremy Corbyn. But no, they've always been very close.
But Rita, to be fair to Albo, which we always are on Outsiders, always happy, as it were, to show all sides of the argument, Albo is definitely very even-handed in who he decides to rip off. Here he is ripping off not only Corbyn again, but a couple of famous American presidents' speeches.
Do you feel better off than you did 8 years ago?
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Do you feel more secure at work?
Is there more or less unemployment in the country?
I did pick a side. Yours.
The election's about taking sides. Labour is on your side.
In Australia, we have serious challenges to solve, and we need serious people to solve them.
We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them.
Unfortunately, Tony Abbott is not the least bit interested in fixing anything.
Bob Rumson is not the least bit interested in solving it.
He's only interested in two things.
He is interested in two things.
Making Australians afraid of it.
Making you afraid of it.
And telling them who's to blame for it.
And telling you who's to blame for it.
Was ripping off Michael Douglas in a film called The American President. What an absolute joke. And yes, Albo was at it again this week.
I believe because I believe we can aim higher.
I believe.
Ripping off French President Macron. There you go. Is nothing original from this bloke. Anyway, I think Macron was actually more convincing. But here's the problem. This bloke Albo is the one the opinion polls tell us is on track to win the next election. So, just in case he does, Rita, James and I have prepared some ideas for Anthony Albanese's first speech as Australian Prime Minister. Take it away, Albo.
To lead or not to lead, that is the question. Whether I am nobler to have suffered the slings and arrows of outrageous good electoral fortune.
I shall fight Tories on the beaches. I shall fight them on the rising seas and oceans. I shall fight mean girls in the caucus and in the canteen. I shall never surrender my Labour leadership.
I have a dream that one day every valley shall have windmills and every hill and mountain shall be covered in solar panels. And so, my fellow Australians, ask not what you can do for your country, but what the welfare state can do for you. Now let's grab the latest Outsiders news. Yes, it's time we celebrated the Australian way of life instead of constantly apologising for our magnificent colonial history, constantly demonising the successes of our pioneering past, and ignoring the astonishing human endeavours, talents, ambitions, struggles and personal sacrifices from Indigenous Australians, British settler Australians, and of course our extraordinary and exceptional migrant Australians, who together have built the greatest nation on earth. But what exactly is the Australian way of life? Well, it gets harder to define every day, and you certainly won't find it being celebrated or even portrayed accurately on the ABC, in our schools or universities, or in much or most of the mainstream media. When I was growing up in what is now a leafy, tree-lined suburb in the middle of Canberra, we were the last house before nothing but open bush as far as the eye could see. As kids, we played amongst the new houses being built. Empty streets would appear in the paddocks, and then the homes and schools and parks and pools all grew up around us. Dams were built, then shopping malls. They even built a lake where there had only ever been a small river. That was the Australian way of life. Being creative, building, taming the bush, developing. I remember the milk bars in grocery shops and cafes and restaurants springing up in the 70s and 80s, bringing with them an entirely new and fascinating multicultural flavour to the Australian way of life. Back in the 60s and 70s, I remember the long hot summers down at the public swimming pool, the boys flirting with the girls. They were boys and they were girls. Showing off, sunbaking, doing bombs, fun, laughter, sunshine, optimism. And a sense that we could do whatever we wanted. The world was our oyster, literally. Down at the south coast, at places like Browley or Bateman's Bay, after a sweltering day at the beach, you'd sit on the rocks and shuck yourself some fresh oysters and knock back a few ice-cold beers without some officious busybody or sign coming and lecturing you. The Australian way of life in the 60s, 70s and 80s was about freedom, creativity, fun, larrikinism, and glowing pride in our nation. Will we ever get that pride and optimism back? Well, we won't if we don't bloody well try. On Tuesday night, I was privileged to be invited to a wonderful event, as he always does, as did Lachlan Murdoch. Lachlan's speech, written and spoken from the heart, was extraordinary. He covered many areas, but there were several moments that I wanted to share, especially with Outsiders fans this morning, because indeed, to me, they sounded like the best ad I'd ever heard for this show, and echoed the thoughts of everyone who watches it.
Often the elites who have benefited most from our country display not a love of our values, but a disdain for them. This is why some of what sets Australia apart is under threat. Our core values, our successes, and even our history are under constant attack. To listen to our national broadcaster, or much of the media elite, is to hear about a uniquely racist, selfish, slavish, and monochromatic country. The reality could not be more different. We are one of the most tolerant, generous, independent, and multicultural countries in human history. How can we expect people to defend the values, interests, and sovereignty of this nation if we teach our children only our faults and none of our virtues? We must arm our young people with the facts and not undermine them with false ideological narratives.
Now to matters closer to home, and Victoria Police Command wants you to forget about what they've been up to for the past couple of years. You know, harassing old women on park benches, arresting pregnant women in their kitchens for Facebook posts, enforcing playground bans on children, and their brutal response to anti-lockdown protests. Yes, please, forget all that and remember they are on our side. After 2 years of overreach and selective policing, the VicPol hierarchy want to rebuild their brand.
Police are promising more of this and this in a brand rebuilding exercise.
We're approachable, we're involved, we're working with them and we're here to help.
They're also hoping to repair a brand damaged by 2 years of unpopular COVID policing.
We know we've had to perform duties and engage with people, and it might not have been what they would have expected in the first instance because of the COVID environment we're in.
No, Commissioner, you didn't have to do any of the insanely illiberal and often downright brutal enforcement that you and your members of your command enthusiastically embrace. You didn't have to allow the police force to become politicised. You didn't have to stand with bureaucrats banning children from playgrounds. You know, want to build trust with the Victorian public? I can't imagine why.
Excuse me, what on earth?
Just put your phone down.
Can you record this? I'm in my pyjamas.
What's this?
I had an ultrasound in an hour.
Yeah, she's pregnant.
What the are you doing? What the are you doing?
Media! 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 Oh!
They're throwing stuff now, and okay, they're shooting. They're now shooting.
We have seen Victoria Police behave abhorrently. We had officers in full riot gear even terrorising fruit and vegetable shoppers at Victoria Market. Again, the heavy-handed response to an anti-lockdown protest was in stark contrast to the force's attitude to a mass BLM march during lockdown. For BLM, there was restraint, no mass arrests or fines. But for those questioning why their kids' schools were closed and their livelihoods were being destroyed, they copped this. There is so much more I could show you, but this is only a 2-hour show. But I do want to highlight a couple of incidents that show just why so many law-abiding Victorians are normally pro-police now look at the force with suspicion. Now, this next incident didn't get any attention despite the brutality and clear misuse of a weapon. This is from an anti-lockdown protest in September last year. Note the officer in the back using his weapon to beat the man on the ground. No consequences, no repercussions for that. And then there was this brutality on the same day that police in full riot gear descended on the fruit and vegetable aisles of Victoria Market. Another police team in Epping were caught on camera stomping on the head of a man suffering a mental health episode.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Now, that poor victim ended up in an induced coma, and the incident was investigated. But guess what? You'll be happy to learn that the watchdog found that Victoria Police acted lawfully when head stomping a mentally ill man during arrest. Yes, put that together with the Sluggate saga, the intimidation of Dan Andrews' critics, the politicisation of the police force and selective policing practices, the Lawyer X scandal that completely undermined the criminal justice system, and the failure to properly swear in more than 1,000 officers, then you can see why there may be a crisis in trust in law enforcement in Victoria. And a little cheap PR isn't going to fix that. Police Command needs a clean-out, starting with Assistant Commissioner Luke Cornelius, who referred to anti-lockdown protesters as batshit crazy conspiracy theorists, but this was his attitude to BLM protesters during the pandemic.
Victoria Police understands and acknowledges the anger and frustration people feel about events taking place overseas and which are dominating our TV. We absolutely understand the sentiment and the anger that lies behind that, and we're very keen to support community here in giving voice to their concerns and their protests.
Yes, you can understand BLM protesters, but no consideration for people whose very livelihoods were being destroyed. Yes, Victoria Police's public image is badly damaged, and as long as the likes of Chief Wiggum over there are in key positions, that ain't going to change.
Well, hello, I'm Topher Field and I'm back with my marbles, this time to explain how the preferential system works in the upper house, the Senate. Last video I talked about the lower house. There's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. The first thing you need to know about the Senate is that there's not one seat up for grabs in each electorate, there's actually 6 in each state. So that means West Australia, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. There are 6 seats up for grabs at the next election in each of those. And that matters. In fact, it actually changes everything about how the election works. The marbles represent the first preference votes, of course. And what I've got here is what I think is a fairly representative sample of what a fictional election might look like in any state in Australia. Here I've got the Liberals with a bunch of votes, Labor with almost as many votes, I've got the Nationals with a bunch of votes, the Greens just diminishing a little bit over time. I've got 4 different freedom-friendly minor parties. Now, who are these guys? These are the guys that I'm going to be voting for, and I want to talk about how we can all vote for all of them, not just one of them. But these include guys like the Liberal Democrats, the UAP, One Nation, GAP, IMOP, A1. There's a bunch of them, right? And it's not about picking one, it's about supporting them all for reasons that will become very, very obvious as we go through this video. And then here we've got all the other guys that have run in the Senate ticket. What happens with the Senate is you don't need to get 50% plus 1 of the votes the way that you do in the lower house. No. There are 6 seats available in each electorate. Each state is its own electorate. What that means is you only need 1/6 of the votes. That's called a quota. You get 1 quota, you get 1 Senate seat. You get 2 quotas, you'll get 2 Senate seats. So what we can see here is the Liberals actually already have enough for at least 1 Senate seat. So let's look at how that works. The Liberals here, this is all the first preference votes. No preferences have been distributed at this point in time. The Liberals here, nice and easy. Clearly, they have at least 1 quota. Bang! The Liberals have already got themselves 1 senator in this hypothetical election. But there's a bunch more votes left over. So let's see. Yep, starting to look to me like they've got themselves 2 senators with votes to spare. So 2 Senate seats in this particular state, this hypothetical election, have already gone to the Liberal Party just on first preferences. Let's see what happens with Labor. Whoop. Yep, definitely. Labor. All right. Once again, just a handful left over. So Labor have 2 Senate seats already with some extra votes left over. Now I know that the Nationals don't quite have enough, neither do the Greens or anybody else, of course. So there are 2 Senate seats up for grabs. But here's what happens. These guys are still in the running for another one. But I can have a look here and say, right, I can see how many first preference votes the Labor Party still have, and they belong just here. In the running for the remaining Senate seats. That's where Labor are right now. In the running for the remaining Senate seats, the Liberals are going to be, oh, so close. They're going to be just here. So we can see that these parties already have 2 seats each, but they have remaining votes that mean they're still in the running to pick up perhaps a 3rd seat each. But the front runners right now are the Nationals and the Greens. You see how that works? They've used these votes to get these. They're still in the running for the remaining ones, but they would still have to get another quota in order to get another seat. So right now we have our front runners, the Nationals and the Greens. Presumably you would think that they're probably going to pick up the remaining 2 Senate seats. But watch what happens. The process from here is pretty much the same because there's no one left with a full quota. The process from here is the same as it is in the lower house. What we do is we go through a process of eliminating the party with the fewest number of votes and distributing those votes to the preferences of the voters. Now, a point that I didn't make in the last video is it's not about party preferences. The parties don't have preferences anymore. They can put their preferred next candidate on their how to vote card, but it is all up to you and what you write on your ticket. So when you get that huge Senate ticket and you write 1 above the line next to the party or in front of the party that you like the best, and then you write 2 in front of the party that you like next best, that's your second preference. You are dictating where your vote goes. And under the current Australian electoral system, that is the only way that a vote's preferences are decided, purely by what you write on your ballot. That's a very important detail. So here we have a bunch of votes that went to a bunch of minor parties that ran in the Senate. Now this bucket actually represents a bunch of different parties. And so of course the preferences are going to go in a bunch of different directions because some of these votes were for maybe an energy party, some were for a legalised cannabis party, some were for a Greens animal rights type party, etc. So presumably the voters would have sent their second preferences off in all sorts of different directions. I'm going to say one of them went there, probably one of them went to the Liberals, certainly one, probably more than one of them went to the Greens, maybe a Nationals in there, and where's Labor gone? Oh yeah, I already put one in Labor. Perhaps one of them preferenced a freedom-friendly minor party. The point is, those votes just went from the number 1, which got eliminated, to the respective number 2 of each of those individual voters and where they decided that their vote was going to go. Now what we have here is a situation where we've distributed the preferences, but that didn't really change the order at all. No, nothing changed, no parties need to be swapped at this point in time, so now we eliminate the next lowest. Now it so happens, because Labor doesn't have much of a quota left over, that it's actually the Labor Party that get eliminated. It's not that they lose the 2 Senate seats they already had, it just means they're no longer in the running for any of the remaining Senate seats. Now I'm going to assume that someone who votes for Labor is probably going to have given a fair bit of preferences to the Greens. A fair percentage of Labor voters would put their preference to the Greens before they put it to anybody else. But you know what? A few would put their preferences towards freedom-friendly minor parties, and perhaps 1 or 2 would even put their preferences towards the Nationals, because remember, it's individual. Each person is doing it for themselves. Once again, the order hasn't really changed here. Or has it? Ah yes. I can see that actually this freedom-friendly minor party picked up just enough votes to actually get over the top of the Liberal Party here, now in the running on preferences. So the Liberal Party gets bumped down. Doesn't really make a difference because there's already one other one that needs to be eliminated first. But that's what happens. As these preferences accumulate, the order gets shuffled around and the smallest number of votes always sits with the party that gets eliminated next. So this is one of the freedom-friendly minor parties. It's unfortunate, but it's going to happen. This could be any one of them. I don't really care which one it is. It just so happens that they're the one that has the least. They get eliminated next. But here's the difference. The people voting for the freedom-friendly minor parties watched this video. That means if you're voting for United Australia Party, for One Nation, for Liberal Democrats, for A1, IMOP, GAP, any of these guys, understand this. Don't just vote for your one favourite freedom-friendly minor party and then vote number 2 for a major. That's insane. Vote for all of the freedom-friendly minor parties before you vote for any of the majors, if you vote for them at all. So what that would mean is that this freedom-friendly minor party, all of their preferences, if their voters have done the right thing, are going to go to other freedom-friendly minor parties. Doesn't matter which one. Again, I'm not barracking for one over the other, but just, there you go. All of those votes are now sitting inside other freedom-friendly minor parties, and that's the key. So let's have a look. How are we doing? Oop, I think that might have swapped these two. Doesn't matter who they are. They just had to swap. One of them just picked up a few more preferences than the others. And there we have it. The Liberals are the next to be eliminated under this hypothetical election. So, we remove the Liberals. We chase the marbles. Now, I'm going to assume that a Liberal voter will typically have preferenced the Nationals quite heavily. So, I'm going to say a whole bunch of their votes are going to go into the Nationals over here, getting them quite close to a quota, but not quite all the way there. Then a handful of Liberal voters will have thrown their votes into various freedom-friendly minor parties. Maybe they went number 1 Liberal, number 2 Liberal Democrats, or One Nation, the UAP, whoever it might be. So there you go. Okay? That's the situation now. Now remembering, these 4 seats are still already allocated. 2 belong to Labor, 2 belong to Liberals. They can't be taken off them. But both Labor and Liberal have now been knocked out of the running for the remaining seats in this hypothetical scenario. Still, the front runners very clearly are the Nationals and the Greens, with a couple of freedom-friendly minor parties sitting in the minor placings at the moment. But here's where the magic happens. Another freedom-friendly minor party has to get eliminated because they have the fewest remaining votes vying for the remaining Senate seats. Fine. But once again, chasing my marbles, once again, those voters watched this video and they made sure that their second preference, or maybe even their third preference by now, because remember, some of the votes have already gone from one of the earlier freedom-friendly minor parties, got eliminated. Some of them went into another freedom-friendly minor party that's now being eliminated again. And their votes are moving down to those voters' third preferences. And they might move to the fourth soon, fifth, sixth. All of them actually matter. The point is, all of these end up in these 2 remaining freedom-friendly minor parties because those voters did the right thing with their preferences. That doesn't actually change the order. We've got Nationals with the most. They're pretty close to a quota. They've almost got a seat in their own right. Then we have the Greens. They're a bit of a way off. Then we have one freedom-friendly minor party. They're even further off, and another freedom-friendly minor party even further off. Who's going to get it? Well, it still looks like these 2. But hang on a second, because the next one to get eliminated is here. Once again, a freedom-friendly minor party. All of their voters watched this video and all of their voters did the right thing and made sure they preferenced all of the freedom-friendly minor parties before they preferenced anybody else. And here, all of a sudden, we have a magic moment where because all of these voters preferenced each other, all of the freedom-friendly minor parties preferenced each other, now as those votes gather, all of a sudden, they overtake the Greens. There's 3 left. And instead of the freedom-friendly minor party being last, which they would have been if people had just voted for them and then preferenced the Liberals, preferenced the Labor, preferenced one of the major parties, because they did the right thing, all of those votes have now gathered into one. I don't care which one, but it's there. And now, it's the Greens that are next to be eliminated from this Senate race. Where their votes would go out of these 2 is anybody's guess. Where would the Greens have put the Nationals? Where would the Greens have put the freedom-friendly minor parties? Well, it's impossible to know. But one of the curiosities of the way the Senate works is it's possible for votes to become exhausted. So what that means is, let's take this voter here. This particular vote, they put number 1 the Greens, and they put number 2 Labor, and then they put number 3 an Animal Justice Party, and then a Transport Matters Party, and then who knows, okay? By the time their primary vote was eliminated, which it has been right now, all of the other ones are already gone. Their number 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6 are already gone. That means that their vote no longer counts. It is literally eliminated, exhausted, out of the count. Now, in a situation like this, I imagine that would happen quite a lot. Quite a few of the Greens' votes simply wouldn't flow to the Nationals or to any of the freedom-friendly minor parties. I'm going to say a few do. But overwhelmingly, the vast majority of Greens voters in their top 6 wouldn't have put either of these parties, and therefore those votes actually end up off to one side, not being used at all. And therefore, we have only 2 left standing. There are 2 seats, there are 2 parties left. Each one has almost a quota, but not quite. So close to a quota for the Nationals, but not quite. There you go, on the floor. Almost a quota for this freedom-friendly minor party, but not quite. And you say, well, where are those votes gone? Well, those are the ones that got exhausted. They're the ones that never got used. This is why preferences are important. And this is why it's so important to put all of the freedom-friendly minor parties on your ballot voting above the line in the Senate. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's the minimum. But if there's more than that in your state, keep going. Include them all so that your vote isn't likely to become exhausted and is more likely to end up being useful to getting a freedom-friendly minor party senator elected in your state. So here's how this hypothetical state plays out. 2 Senate seats to the Labor Party, 2 Senate seats to the Liberal Party, 1 to the Nationals, effectively the Liberals anyway, and 1 to a freedom-friendly minor party. Now this right here, this 6th seat, I'll swap them around. This is the one that the Greens traditionally have taken in every state in Australia. For the last 20, 30 odd years, the Greens have held a bunch of Senate seats. Why? Because they keep picking up that last Senate seat where they don't even need a full quota. In fact, in theory, that last seat could be picked up with only just above half a quota. And they've done that plenty of times. They've had elections where they've only gotten 6, 7% of the vote, and they've still gotten a Senate seat because through preferences, they managed to get more than half a quota, and hey presto, there it is. They've got senators. That's how the Greens have been able to exercise so much influence over Australian politics for the last, well, as long as I've been alive. This strategy has the ability to turn that on its head and put these Senate seats into the hands of freedom-friendly minor parties. It works because we all use the Australian preferential system the way it was supposed to be used. There's a reason why we have it. This is what it's for. You vote number 1 for the people you like the most. Number 2 for the next best. Number 3 for the next best. 4, 5, 6. Hold your nose if you have to. I don't agree with all of these parties on everything. In fact, I've got fundamental agreements on many things with most of them. But they're better than the crop that we've got right now. And they're an awful lot better than the Greens continuing to hold the balance of power the way they have for the last 30, 40 years. So this is the strategy in the Senate. Getting that 6th Senate seat from every state into the hands of a freedom-friendly minor party. And we can do that by using our preferences wisely. My name's Topher Field. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've learned something. The number 1 thing that I need you to do is to share this video. Make sure that other people understand what you now understand, how preferential voting works in the Senate, and how we can get senators elected from these freedom-friendly minor parties just by using our preferences intelligently. You'll find me at topherfield.net and on all the usual social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. There's a bunch of others I don't even know that I'm on. You can follow me there and I'll see you in the next video.
Rita Hannity mentions about the police here, the brutality, it shows it. You've got to remember that when you, even if you look at these videos, it's only a few rotten apples and a few extremely rotten apples that are causing a lot of the problems, and these people have to be removed, or some have been charged. The police have taken care of some of this. It doesn't apply to about 80-90% of decent cops that are out there trying to do their business. They only have to obey lawful orders, and unfortunately, when it's a job and you just got to keep it. So the next little clip, which you'll see on YouTube or on Rumble, is the police are trying to do something about it, and they have explained that, but there is a lot of animosity out there, which unless they can show that these criminal guys that they've got on board or had on board at the time have been removed, and some have been charged, confidence will not come back. So as an ex-cop, you'll find, like all ex-cops are very embarrassed, because you've got to remember the days, guys, when a policeman or a policewoman would not venture onto somebody's property because it was trespass, and that was one of the most important things. You stood outside on the footpath trying to get them to come out to talk to you because you could not go into private property. We've got to go back to those days, and real cops, that's what they want. I'd like to thank everybody who's come across and supported us on Rumble. It's going to be a slow process to get up that hill, but we have got lots of good things to say, and I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe.